house in Baltimore. And, of course, the Capitals, the Wizards getting going, and the NFL draft on Thursday night. This guy has stayed pretty busy lately. He covers all things DC sports, and not just that train wreck out by Dulles with the burgundy and gold, but the good parts, too, from our perspective. The Wizards and the Capitals in a busy, busy time. And I tell you what, man, 5-6 days ago, Ben Standing, it looked like the Capitals were in trouble up in Toronto. I was up there going to Game 4 last Wednesday and thinking, is this the end? Is this how it's going to end for the Capitals? Meanwhile, the Wizards could do no wrong through the first couple of hours of basketball. Certainly things got a lot different when they got down to Atlanta and on Tuesday night. Now the Wizards are in that, are they going to make it through the week kind of feel, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely changed a lot. I mean, you look at where the Eastern Conference was at the beginning of the playoffs. Boston goes down 0-2. Toronto down 2-1 after getting smoked by Milwaukee. Cleveland sort of scuffling with Indiana a little bit, and the Wizards are up 2-0. Now you fast forward a few days. Boston is probably going to win that series. Toronto now has the lead. Cleveland's already swept, and now the Wizards are the ones in a dogfight at 2-2. Yeah, things have turned dramatically. I mean, on the one hand, no home team has lost yet. That is important to keep in perspective for all of us. And the Wizards are obviously much better at home, and they have home court advantage. So they've got that going for them. But coming off these last two games, losing by double digits in each, they can't make a three-pointer to save their life right now. It's definitely feeling a little more stressful watching the Wizards right now than it was a few days ago.
Well, I ran into Ted Leonsis just before Game 3 up in Toronto, just walking through the Air Canada Center, and then, the next night he's in Washington, next night his son's here, he's there. I think if you're a fan of both teams equally, and I think that that's only a few people, right, Ben? I mean, you're in D.C., you're either one or the other, or more of one or more of the other. But even if you're just an interested D.C. observer or Baltimore sports fan who supports the Wizards or the Capitals, this has been a real roller coaster ride because, certainly for the Wizards, things were looking pretty easy. And for the Capitals, I don't think any of us ever thought it would be easy, despite the gaudy President's trophies they've now put up 2 years in a row. But, concern for the Wizards has to be real based on how they looked and where they are in the here and now. It wasn't a good look for them down in Atlanta.
No, it definitely was not. Yeah, I mean, the Capitol situation, I sort of more just pay attention to them from deeper from the outside looking in, and the fan base, knowing the history of everything, was freaking out beyond belief. And to some degree, understandably, it was an incredibly tight series there with Toronto, and I was surprised as the 1-8 matchup. Ironically, I think with the Wizards, because Atlanta had been so poor late in the season, and the Wizards had been one of the better teams in the NBA, record-wise at least for most of the year, I think a lot of people, and I'll probably be honest, myself included, thought that this was a pretty good matchup for the Wizards. I thought they could win in 5 games. But like I said, I was basing that on, the Wizards actually making a shot.
Well,
and they haven't been doing that. Their 4 best three-point shooters during the regular season all shot at least 39%. Right now, they're all below 30%. Defense has been an issue for the Wizards for most of the year, but they've been outscoring teams. Now that's not coming easy because the 3-point shots are missing. And look, and also I think the other element to this, somebody brought this up to me today. There's an experience factor. We always talk about going to the playoffs. It's a different kind of level, and I don't know. I think sometimes maybe from the outside we're all like, still the same game. But you talk to people who are playing it, and it is a different deal. And Atlanta has way more experience in the playoffs than the Wizards do. No better example of that than that Paul Millsap, Markieff Morris matchup at power forward. Morris held his own against Millsap during the season. He pretty much beat him up in Game 1. But since then, Millsap's taken over, I think partly fueled by Markieff Morris's antics and words in this series, and which is perhaps because of some inexperience. He's not realizing, oh, wait a minute, I say something today, I'm actually going to see this guy again tomorrow. It's not just going to go off into, these words aren't just going to disappear because I won't see this guy again for 2 months.
Well, and then there's the depth that the Hawks have that the Wizards have talked about, right? I mean, we talked about Benchup, you talked about Bogdanovich and Jennings and the guys that you bring in. I mean, Oubre's kind of a forgotten guy at this point, but the Hawks don't go 40 minutes a guy, right? I mean, they're pulling 7, 8, 9 guys deep, and they have no problem with mixing different guys in and staying out of foul trouble as well, which has been another issue for the Wizards throughout the week, right?
Absolutely. No, you make a great point. Markieff Morris has almost double the amount of fouls than he has field goals over the last 3 games. And when he's sitting on the bench, they really don't have anybody that can guard Paul Millsap, and Millsap's been the real force for Atlanta. But then even beyond that, like you said, the Wizards bench played better as the season went along, but Atlanta has better options, and right now the Wizards bench, it does kind of feel like it was earlier in the year when like even in Game 4, the Wizards, I think it was like the Wizards outscored Atlanta in the first and third quarters, so the quarters where the starters are playing most of the time, by plus 16. But in the second and the fourth quarter, where typically you're starting with your bench in those quarters, the Wizards are outscored by 26 points. And this is what we saw for most of the season. Now Jason Smith has kind of gone back to the guy we saw earlier, where he's not making shots, and defensively he really can't help you against a guy like Millsap. Bojan Bogdanovic, who he actually got it going yesterday, but over the course of the series, he's been off. Kelly Oubre was something of a revelation the last 10 games of the year, but now he looks more like the guy we saw the first 50 or so games, where he's sort of still learning on the job, and there's no time for learning on the job in the playoffs. So, yeah, you're right. The Wizards got by because their starting five was unbelievable for most of the year. Right now, they aren't clicking collectively outside of Wall and Beal, and the bench is reverting back to where they were earlier in the year.
Well, I think the other thing with Wall and Beal is they are your only hope, right? I mean, if you're going to win 2 out of the next 3 games, it's going to be because Wall and Beal shoot better than they've shot the last couple. In the way they played in Game 1 and 2, right?
I mean, I think it's sort of a yes and no thing. Obviously, they have to play great, right? I mean, these are the guys, these are your big stars. That's what they have to do. But, Atlanta yesterday had 7 guys scoring double figures. Millsap led their way with 19 points. The Wizards were getting balanced like that earlier in the year when Otto Porter was hitting 3 and 4 3-pointers a game. Markieff Morris was effective. Marcin Gortat was putting up double-doubles like he did in the first 2 games of the series. But they're not getting that right now. So I always think that, yes, you obviously want Wall and Beal to take control, but especially in the case of Wall, ideally you want him to be in like the 18 points and 12 assists range. For me, when he starts scoring, it's not that he's turning into Russell Westbrook and taking too many shots. It's that other guys aren't making shots and he's having to compensate, and that's when the Wizards offense starts looking like something that they don't want to see. They want ball movement. They want spread the court, getting lots of guys involved. That hasn't been the case, largely because they just don't have enough guys hitting shots.
We are chatting with Ben Standig. He does all things DC sports, the Wizards, a little bit of Capitals, Nationals, and whatnot. But the Redskins will be on your mind on Thursday night, and I guess the Redskins Nation. This has been a rough last 90 days, right? Since since Kirk Cousins left the field the last time, we have seen. And I speak to it here with the Orioles and Angelos as well. Poor ownership gets deodorized by 10 and 6 and 9 and 7 seasons. It gets really displayed when things go wrong, and the Orioles will deal with that at the end of the Duquette Showalter thing. And the Redskins just can't stay out of the fact that Dan Snyder runs the place, and that sleazy, greasy, some lies, some white lies, some catches if you can. That's sort of been Snyder's game for 2 decades now, right?
Well, I mean, certainly the Redskins have not been a model franchise, to say the least, for the last 20 years, off and on. And the Scott McLuhan case, where their GM, before he gets fired, he gets thrown under the bus and then run over a few times by some quotes from somebody who's in the organization to the Washington Post, and kind of a weird and messy and honestly. Sort of an unsightly situation. I will say this: the last 2 years were fairly quiet. There really wasn't anything. Once they benched RG3 a couple years ago and went with Kirk Cousins, it's been fairly normal.
Even the benching of him was not normal because books have been written, his relationship with the owner. As long as he was there, it could never be normal, I don't think, right? He was the chosen one doing fast food commercials. He did more of those than he threw touchdown passes, quite frankly, right?
Well, I mean, you're right, but I guess my point is, like, once they made that decision, and it worked out for them that Kirk Cousins obviously turned into a pretty good starter, the RG3 thing was a minor distraction in that moment. It was always of mind, but nothing was really happening. He wasn't saying anything. The team wasn't saying anything. And like you said before, winning sort of cures a lot of stuff. And so from the sort of what we're used to with the Redskins' dysfunction, there really hasn't been that under Gruden these last 2 seasons. But then once the season ended, like you said, and the Scott McLuhan thing kicked in, everything came flooding back. all the memories of these past 20 years and how things are out of whack. The one thing I am sort of curious to see is, it's been quiet now for the last month since they moved on from McLuhan, and I really do think Gruden is a calming influence for everybody around there. He doesn't get high, he doesn't get low. The players seem to like him a lot. I am sort of curious to see, will they move? Will it get past this? Will it kind of be what I just said, kind of relatively quiet now that whatever happened with McLuhan, now that that's out the door? I'm not saying I'm betting on that or that anybody should believe that this organization has it all figured out by any stretch, but I will be curious to see if Gruden has more of an input now on what's happening there, and if that's the case, then maybe he can keep things calm. But either way, they're going to be an interesting team. There's a reason they were put on national television 5 times this year. And it's not because people think they're a Super Bowl contender. It's because they're an interesting team, and not always for good reasons.
Oh, I want some hard knocks. That's what I want. I want to know what's really going on down there. From a draft perspective, though, and I know you cover this a lot, Ben, as well, it's busy, right? I mean, between baseball and hockey and I don't know how we're wearing out remote controls in this area. I'll promise you that. But from the football standpoint, where the Redskins are in the draft and where the Ravens are, I think for all of these teams, the quarterback part of this is going to define everyone before and after, right? I mean, that's just what this draft's about at this point.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what anybody wants to say about quarterbacks, they are. I think it sort of bothers a lot of sort of football people because they want to try to view it so that all positions have certain value. But the reality is quarterback overshadows everything. In the NFL, if you don't have one, you don't have anything. I mean, you basically have to have a world-class, all-time level defense the way the Ravens sort of did with Trent Dilfer and things like that.
Yeah, it was only 2 decades ago now.
Well, at least more recently, like the way Denver did it with Peyton Manning last year, but Peyton Manning was pretty much done, and Denver still won the Super Bowl because their defense was an all-timer. But it takes that to overcome having poor play at the quarterback spot. And that's why teams will overdraft quarterbacks. It happens every year. And it looks like that's going to be the case this year. I mean, the people who are really the film evaluators, nobody seems to like anybody. It seems like if you left it to the Kuipers of the world, no quarterback that would get picked in round 1 this year.
Well, and I guess it's easy for the pundits to say, well, I would just pass. Well, you don't have to go out and play 16 games this year. The Browns do. The Jets do, right? I mean, all of these teams that don't have a quarterback or have one, like, let's say the Bills, maybe they believe in Tyrod Taylor, maybe they don't. There's all these new administrations, new coordinators. All of that goes into this, but all of these people universally have looked at these quarterbacks and said, if I had my druthers, I wouldn't go to war with Mitchell Trubisky or Deshaun Watson or Deshaun Kaiser or Pat Mahomes, who was, I've got people in him with the top half of the first round now. I remember Kyle Bowler around here, bro. You know what I mean? I know what that looks like for the next 4 to 6 years. And, it made one former coach my business partner here at WNST. But yet, 16 and 17, where the Ravens and the Redskins are, those are the places that if all 3 of those guys aren't gone, that's where the Houston Texans are going to want to get involved in this. And I know the Redskins would be involved in their own right? Like, there's no saying that they wouldn't take Deshaun Watson at 17, right?
Oh, I pray that doesn't happen. I don't need more stress in my life. If they're going to keep Kirk Cousins and take Deshaun Watson, I might have to punt the Redskins.
Are they going to keep Kirk Cousins, though? I mean, I guess that's the question, right? Wouldn't they rather give him to the Bills if they don't believe in him? Look, we've seen hot potato getting passed around from Jay Cutler, right, till somebody was crazy enough to give him $25 million a year. Look at the Brock Osweiler thing. This time last year, he was going to save Denver and then save Houston, right? And now he's given away to Cleveland, and they're talking about using the 1 or the 12 and another quarterback. So it is amazing how the flavor of the month, gets out of term, which makes the Garoppolo thing interesting. I think even the A.J. McCarron thing is interesting from the Bengals' perspective as to how all that's going to look on Saturday, let's say.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I mean, look, I've been on the record, I guess, for some time now, a couple months, that it's fine. The Redskins gave him the franchise tag because they sort of needed to do it based on the NFL calendar. But if they don't get him to a long-term deal by Thursday, I would look to trade him. They're not realistically a Super Bowl contender, and he seems when you look at the whole situation, he's most likely going to walk next year as a free agent. Then they get essentially nothing. Now they can get a larger package for him. Now the question is, does the team who's getting him, do they think they can sign him to a long-term deal, or will they be stuck in that position of letting him go, and that's sort of the dance there. I personally kind of wonder how much this talk about the Niners, which is the team most often associated with getting Cousins because they have Kyle Shanahan, his former offensive coordinator here in Washington, how much this talk of the Niners looking at Trubisky hard is a signal to Cousins' camp to say, hey, look, if you guys don't work this out with the Redskins, we're going to move on because we don't want to wait a whole another year to have no quarterback. If you want to figure out how to get the Redskins to make a deal with us, we're in. But otherwise, we got to go. And then Cousins, if he really wants to play with Shanahan, maybe he's got to get on his guy, hey, let's work with the Redskins here and see what we can do. But I will just say this on the quarterback. Like a team like Houston, they've got a lot to work with. They've got a really good defense. You've got DeAndre Hopkins. You've got Lamar Miller. If they were to take a quarterback, Deshaun Watson or whomever, I think maybe that could make sense. My issue is when a team that's horrible, like San Francisco, like Cleveland, they take the quarterback and throw that guy in there, the chances of that guy succeeding drop dramatically. And that's why I don't always mind a team waiting on taking a quarterback until they have more pieces in place. Dak Prescott, I bet, doesn't happen. Last year, if you put him on San Francisco, a terrible team. But he was on a really good team with a great offensive line and that running back, and I think that really helps him a ton.
Well, that helped Flacco. That helped Ben Roethlisberger, quite frankly, right?
Exactly.
Those are benefits that Peyton Manning and Troy Aikman didn't have coming into the league, nor did Tim Couch or any of the Cleveland quarterbacks ever, have a team around them. And we're on with Ben Standig. He's down in D.C. covering all. Tell everybody what you do, because what don't you do in D.C.? I mean, you're kind of everywhere. You're an octopus down there.
I appreciate that. Well, for the Redskins, you can find me on BreakingBurgundy.com. That's part of the Scout.com network. On the Wizards, I'm in a lot of different spots, but probably the most consistent thing I'm doing is a daily podcast, Locked On Wizards, which is a lot of fun to do. I also do a lot of coverage of Georgetown basketball, and I'm actually covering the Baltimore Orioles this week for a couple games.
So you got a press pass and I don't. Figure that out, right?
Oh, is that? Well, I got a press pass for the day. They didn't give me one for the long term. I don't think they trust me that much yet.
Oh yeah, well they got to get to know you. I'm banned at Oriole Park and apparently at Nats Park too. But welcomed everywhere else in the world. I'm sort of like the American Express that you can't use at baseball games within 30 miles of my home. But it's all cool, dude. They've gotten off to a nice start too, and so have the Nats. I mean, from a baseball standpoint in this corridor, and I know nobody's talking about it, and nobody's going to the games in Baltimore for sure because I can see it out my window. But, the football part of this calms down after the weekend, I think. And obviously the Caps and the Wizards believe they're going to own the next 4 to 6 weeks. Time will tell. But very quietly, the baseball teams here have made themselves relevant into June and July by having a strong April, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right. Like, I only because of Twitter am I really aware of what's going on with the Nationals because I just don't have enough bandwidth to focus on everything. And the Orioles, team of my youth, I do pay more attention to, so I'm aware that they're off to a great start. I'm somewhat honestly always amazed that they're able to do this. I shouldn't be at this point, but I keep looking at especially their starting pitching. I'm like, oh boy, do they have enough? But Dylan Bundy is finally becoming that guy that they
Come on, Ben. You don't want me to call you on the days when Ubaldo Jimenez starts and say, relax, Ubaldo's starting tonight, right? or when a Wade Miley is going, or when a TBD turns into an Alec Archer or an Aquino, right? I mean, it is quite the box of chocolates around here, right? And I said to everyone, the ownership still stinks. The morale, for the most part, still stinks. And now they've gotten off to another great start, which rises all the boats, it deodorizes everything, and nobody says, well, why didn't they go get a pitcher in the offseason? Why do they have 5 designated hitters on the team? But when you start playing 700 ball, you buy yourself time. And look, over the next week, they're going to New York and Boston. They can put distance between themselves if they have a great week this week, right?
They definitely could. I mean, it's a shame that as Bundy is becoming the guy that they all hoped he would be, that Kevin Gausman, at least at the moment, is going through a rough stretch where he's looking off. If they could get both of those guys to perform at the level that everybody hoped they would when they were drafted. I mean, ultimately when the Orioles have made the playoffs in recent years, once you get to that playoffs, you're like, oh man, they're 1 and 2 starters going up against whoever the Yankees or the Red Sox have. They just can't match up, and that's where I think they lose. But now, if you tell me that Bundy and Gausman in particular, maybe Chris Tillman, I don't know, but if those 2 guys can play at that high level, now things get interesting. I mean, that's the difference between 162 and the playoffs. 162 is about how do you figure out how to get somebody out there that day who can give you 6. The playoffs, you need somebody who can go out there and dominate, and they don't always have that guy, although Bundy knock on wood, right now is looking like that guy.
You know, it's fascinating around the division. We all say, well, the Red Sox, they have all the pitching, they spend all the money. You know, I've seen the Red Sox play a couple times now. I mean, I don't think there's any point the Orioles can't take 2 out of 3 from them in any pitching matchup. Certainly the Yankees have their problems, front and back end of the rotation. Tampa, we've seen them every year. They have the blossoming this and that and can never quite get there. And the Orioles already took care of Archer in the first game. And Toronto has the best pitching, and they are in that weird spot that you don't want to be in. You know, talk about the great start of the Orioles here that really sort of gets the mojo and leads you into May and June with a chance that you lose for a week, that you can, sustain. Boy, the Blue Jays have built themselves no room for error now, but they do have the best pitching and maybe some believe the best players. Boy, PU for the first month for them. Kind of like the Astros last year or the Giants last year, right?
Well, as I said about having only semi-paying attention to the Nats, I don't quite know what's going on with Toronto, but I know they've not gotten off to a good start. I also don't have any Blue Jays on my fantasy team, so I really am haven't paid much attention to them. But look, I mean, at the end of the day, all games count. The Orioles are off to a good start, and yeah, I mean, they need to make those moves. Plus, they need to make those moves now. Plus, like when you get to the trading deadline, you know, for the most part, they haven't been the team making that big splashy move. So you figure these other teams will have another ace up their sleeve, whatever. They'll get that extra hitter pitcher that they need, and the Orioles may have to hold on. So it's good now that they're able to get as many wins as they can to separate themselves. Hopefully.
Ben, great having you on, man. We're going to follow you out at Ben Standig. That's STANDIG. You may see him on Comcast Sportsnet doing some draft stuff, as well as at Locked On Wizards and breaking. Is it Break on Burgundy or Breaking Burgundy? Give it to me.
Breaking Burgundy. I came up with the name while Breaking Bad was still a big thing. So there you go.
Okay, that's an easy way for me to remember it. We're going to follow you at Ben Standig, though, on Twitter. Great having you on. I'll call you from time to time and talk some real baseball. All right?
Sounds like great. Appreciate it. Thanks.
You got it, Ben Standig, joining us here from Washington, D.C., which will be continue to be the epicenter all weekend long, even though the draft's going on. Birds are off in New York and then Boston, and, of course, the Wizards and the Caps playing the biggest games of the year right now. I will be in Pittsburgh for Games 3 and 4 on Monday and Wednesday next week. I'll be broadcasting live next week from Pittsburgh. We might even have some special guests with Yins and Nat. We'll find out. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there throughout draft week to bring you up to speed on everything we have on the radio. You can listen when you want, where you want, how you want. We podcast and deliver it to you. It's all brought to you by buyatoyota.com. Morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning, and that's brought to you by Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com. It is still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life there. Dennis Colazzos, our draft expert around here, will get you ready for the draft on Thursday. Be here each and every Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV. That's the Sunday Sports Voice. Now heard on Thursdays from 3 until 5 here at WNST.net. And, of course, they sponsor our WNST tech service at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. We will be very active on the tech service the next couple of days. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, if you don't want your phone going off with draft picks, put it on vibrate or something, because we're going to be getting all the news out to you. If there's any deals, any trades, anything weird that happens, you're somewhere Thursday, Friday, Saturday where you can't be near the television, we got you covered. WNST Tech Service there for you. All brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, our road trips are legendary. We've now taken over 18,000 people on road trips. Orioles, Terps, Caps. This time it's the Ravens, Nashville, Green Bay, Minnesota, London. We've got you covered. It's all up on the road trips tab at WNST.net, and $100 off every trip this week only. Got to sign up by next Friday. We're trying to get as many folks into the boat as we can. We're going to Milwaukee and Green Bay. We're going to Lambeau Field. We're going to the Mall of America. We're going to Big Ben. We're going to some honky-tonk in Nashville, and I'll make fun of country music, but it'll be fun. I love Nashville, by the way. I got some great spots in Nashville to eat as well. I may be breaking those out on all our friends. Learn about that at WNST.net. You can email me anytime, nasty@WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.